Welcome to the Voices of Life podcast, a ministry of the Church for Life. Today we step into the pages of American history to uncover the stories behind one remarkable date, August 10th. Two events, 25 years apart, shaped the nation in ways few people realize. Here to guide you through this day in history is Pastor David. This is your August 10. Did you know? Moment.
Welcome to the Voices of Life. I'm Pastor David. Some dates in history carry a single story, but August 10th carries two, and together they reveal the tension, the hope, and the complexity of the 19th century America. On August 10th, 1821, Missouri entered the Union as a 24th state, capping a 3-year constitutional crisis over slavery. On August 10, 1846, President James Polk signed an act establishing the Smithsonian Institution, fulfilling the extraordinary bequest of a British scientist who never set foot on American soil. Territorial expansion and sectional conflict on one hand, scientific, educational, and intellectual institution building on the other. Let's explore both stories in depth. So Missouri becomes the state. The United States is a nation expanding and dividing. The Missouri story started long before 1821. After the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the United States more than doubled in size. The land would become Missouri was the home to native people, French settlers, and a growing number of Americans moving west after the War of 1812. Congress organized the Missouri Territory in 1812, and by January 8, 1818, territorial residents formally petitioned Congress for statehood. But Missouri's request ignited a political firestorm. Missouri's admission in 1821 was part of a growing sectional crisis over slavery. The question was simple and explosive. Would Missouri enter the Union as a free state or a slave state? At the time, the balance between free and slave states in the Senate was delicate. Adding one more slave state could shift national political power. So we have to talk about the Tallmadge Amendment, the spark that lit the crisis. In February 1819, Representative James Tallmadge Jr. of New York proposed amendments to Missouri's statehood bill. Number 1, no new enslaved people could be brought into Missouri. And number 2, children of enslaved people would be freed by age 25. The House approved the amendments. The Senate rejected them. Congress adjourned without resolving the crisis. The Missouri controversy became the first intense congressional debate over the westward expansion of slavery since the Constitutional Convention. The nation had reached a breaking point. So let's speak to the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Congress eventually crafted a fragile peace. 1, Missouri would enter as a slave state. 2, Maine would enter as a free state. And 3, slavery would be prohibited in the remaining Louisiana territory north of the 36-degree, 30-foot latitude, except Missouri. The compromise temporarily reduced sectional tensions, but it did not solve the underlying slavery question. This compromise preserved the Senate balance for the moment. So now, Missouri had to write its constitution, and another crisis emerged. Missouri's Constitutional Convention produced a document on July 19, 1820, but one provision caused immediate national controversy. It directed the legislature to prevent free black people from entering the state. This raised constitutional concerns under Article 9, Privileges and Immunities Clause. Even James Madison wrote about the issue in November 1820. Congress had to negotiate a second Missouri Compromise, clarifying that Missouri's Constitution could not violate the rights of U.S. citizens. Only then could Missouri be admitted. So on August 10, 1821, Missouri becomes the 24th state. President James Monroe issued the final proclamation on August 10, 1821. Missouri entered as a slave state, paired with Maine's admission as a free state. This moment marked a turning point in the national debate over slavery, a debate that would intensify for decades. Missouri's courts played a major role in the slavery debate. In 1824, the Missouri Supreme Court established the principle, once free, always free. This became central to the case of Dred and Harriet Scott, who sued for freedom in 1846. The controversy eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court as the Dred Scott versus Sanford. In 1857, the Supreme Court declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, a decision that pushed the nation closer to civil war. Missouri's story is not just about statehood, it's about the moral and constitutional struggle that defined America. So let's move on to another important part of August 10th in history, the Smithsonian Institution, which occurred in 1846. A gift from a man who never visited America. Now we turn to the second August 10th story, one rooted in, not in conflict, but in curiosity. The Smithsonian's creation in 1846 grew out of a very different question. What should the young American Republic do with an extraordinary scientific bequest from a British scientist? The scientist was James Smithson. He was a chemist, mineralogist, fellow of the Royal Society. He had never visited the United States. Yet, in his 1826 will, he wrote that if his nephew died without heirs, his estate should go to the United States to create an institution in Washington for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men. Smithsonian's nephew died in 1835 without heirs. Suddenly, the United States inherited more than 100,000 gold sovereigns, over 500,000 in American currency. Congress accepted the bequest in 1836, but spent nearly a decade debating what kind of institution Smithson intended. Congress debated for approximately 8 years over the bequest and how exactly it should be used. Ideas that came up were a national university, a library, a museum, a research center, an observatory, or maybe a combination of all of it. On August 10, 1846, President James K. Polk signed the act establishing the Smithsonian Institution. The law created a federal trust instrumentality governed by a board of regents, including the vice president, chief justice, members of Congress, and private citizens. The institution was therefore intended to be a national center for the acquisition, preservation, production, and dissemination of knowledge. This was far more than a museum. It was a national commitment to learning. Joseph Henry served as the first secretary as the board elected him as a leading American scientist, and they felt he would be the best person to start the institution. Henry emphasized scientific research, publication, international cooperation, and exchange of knowledge. He did not want the Smithsonian to become merely a collection of curiosities. He wanted it to be the center of discovery. The iconic Smithsonian Castle, designed by James Renwick Jr., was completed in 1855. It housed laboratories, offices, lecture halls, exhibition rooms, specimen storage, and even Henry's living quarters. It became the symbolic heart of the institution. Fire, growth, and legacy. A devastating fire struck the castle in 1865, just 10 years later, destroying important papers. But the Smithsonian survived and grew. Today, it includes 21 museums and galleries, the National Zoo, vast scientific and cultural collections, and global research programs, all from the bequest of one man who never visited America. And I think that's very important today because there's a lot of controversy about how the trustees of the Smithsonian are putting things in there that do not match up with our history and creativity of a nation. The president, as we know, has been trying to do something about it. But as we just discussed, this was created by Congress, and there is a formal board, and it's that board's responsibility to oversee and see if the secretary or the president or whomever is not doing their jobs, they need to go ahead and act. And that's how our American Republic works. So let's talk about the remarkable connection between the two, the statehood and the Smithsonian. Here is the heart of your Did You Know moment. Both events happen on August 10th, exactly 25 years apart. Territorial expansion and sectional conflict on the one hand, scientific, educational, and intellectual institution building on the other. Missouri's admission revealed the nation's political fractures. The Smithsonian's founding revealed the nation's intellectual aspirations. Together, they show a country struggling and striving all at the same time. August 10th teaches us that history is rarely one-dimensional. On one side, Missouri's admission reminds us that moral questions cannot be postponed forever. On the other, the Smithsonian's founding reminds us that knowledge is a gift we must steward, we must protect, and we must keep for the legacy that it was intended for future generations. Conflict and curiosity, division and discovery, a nation wrestling with its identity and reaching for its potential. History speaks, and if we listen closely, it still speaks life. I'm Pastor David. Thank you for joining me today on this look at August 10th in history, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this August 10th edition of the Voices of Life podcast. Every date in history carries a story. Some carry two. And some, like today, remind us how far we've come and how far we still must go. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep learning, and keep listening for the voices that still speak life. On behalf of Pastor David, this has been your Did You Know moment. Be courageous, be thoughtful, and we will see you next time.